Hello, good afternoon and welcome to the HSE Half Hour. My name is Lauren Howard. I'm the Head of Client Engagement at Executive Network Group. Myself, my colleague Laura Alcott, usually here, bring you a live health and safety show every month talking all things recruitment and safety. Laura isn't with me today. She's been in the Netherlands, I think, at the European HSE Congress, so she'll be joining next time. But instead, I have a fabulous guest. Craig Paton joins me today. So thank you very much for joining us, Craig. Before I suppose get you to introduce yourself, I suppose I should say it's a live and interactive session today. So if you have any comments, any questions, please do feel free to send them through. We will get to them as soon as the conversation allows. So the reason that myself and Laura usually do this show is I spend a hell of a lot of time researching, creating white papers, on different health and safety industry trends, and we wanted to share some of this information and I suppose guest insight with our wider LinkedIn audience. So as mentioned, we've got a big show today. There's always a massive topic to get through, and I think this one will be really insightful. So yes, as mentioned, special guest Craig. Please do introduce yourself, Craig, and why you're here joining me today.
Hi Lauren, listen, thanks for the invite. I've followed you guys for a wee while, and I've always been intrigued to see what topics you're covering. Long story short, been in health and safety and construction for best part of 20 years. I know I don't look like an old man, but I am. I was worked with Balfour Beatty, and I worked my way up through the tools into kind of, I guess, assistant manager. Then I saw one of my friends passed away on site with a fatal accident, so started delving into health and safety to try and make a difference and see if there was any way that we could make a real dent in it and try and stop what happened to me happening to anybody else.
Yeah, definitely. So I think today's topic is one of massive importance, and one I think that's been growing in terms of, I suppose, the awareness of it. So today we'll be discussing everything mental health, well-being and addiction. So predominantly within the construction industry, as I know that your background, of course, is that place. But I think the link between this topic and safety professionals is relevant for all sectors. So again, a huge topic to cover in just 30 minutes. So we're actually holding a roundtable on the subject of well-being, whose responsibility is, and I think it's a tricky question to answer. So what would you say to that, Craig? Is it a safety responsibility? Is it for HR professionals, or is it for someone else? Who is responsible for the mental health and well-being of the team when they're on site?
Me personally, I think it's everybody's responsibility. I know that sounds silly. It's like saying safety is everybody's responsibility, but the mental health of your teams, even if it is just having a chat with somebody at the water cooler just to see if they're okay. Me personally, I was offering out my services for free last year with it being Mental Health Awareness Week, and it was very quiet. Anytime I was speaking to a health and safety manager, they would say it was HR's problem, and kind of vice versa. So it does sit in that sit in the middle between HR and health and safety. I would, as I said, I think it's everybody's issue. I think we need to really look at this because it's not going anywhere. You know, it seems to be getting progressively worse. There was the stats came out from the NHS England last week, and it was saying that it's up to 300 billion now. It's costing the English economy. And when I was speaking to a colleague last week, they were saying that the forecast that's going to top 17 trillion by 2030 if we don't sort it. You know, if we don't speak about it now, then it's going to just keep getting worse and worse, unfortunately. And part of what I'm doing just now is to work with people and see if there's any way that we can, you know, break this stigma and really get people talking, because it's been going on for far too long. You know yourself, we've got two men in the construction industry lose their lives to suicide every day, and it's just wrong. You know, it seems to be something that people want to bury their head in the sand and just hope that it goes away, but You know, we've got to get more serious. It can't just keep going the way that it's going, Laura.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel, as you've rightly said there, you know, the problems are getting exacerbated. And I think, especially within the construction world, you know, there's a lot of stigma, isn't there, around it still. So I suppose that leads me on to ask, you know, in your experience then, Craig, what are some common misconceptions around mental health, around addiction within the construction sector, and how can we work to break down these stigmas?
I think part of what I'm doing just now, as I said, I'm a health and safety manager, and part of what I'm doing just now is sharing my story. I was an alcoholic when I was coming through the tools. First steps into health and safety, exact same. Had my problems with alcohol and drugs, and it's telling your story and just not being afraid of the repercussions. What comes at the end of it, I do see it as it's more lived experience is definitely required to try and remove that stigma, and it's how we go about it is the important thing. It's having that culture of trust where people can openly speak about what's going on in their personal lives. I think a lot of HR advisors or health and safety advisors look at it as the health and safety at work. Why should we care what goes on in the house? But when we've got so many people losing their lives to suicide, it's really is. It's getting beyond a joke that we do really need to start talking about this. And
Yeah.
apologies for saying guys there are men, but in the construction industry, you know yourself, it's very male dominated.
Yeah.
Um, and when we saw the stats for 2021 and 503 suicides are male out of 507, that kind of 99%, you know, that kind of speaks volumes. It's trying to remove that stigma. And for me, it does seem that when I'm speaking to guys, there's a lot of very confused men out there. You know, I speak to some guys and they don't know what they're meant to be anymore. You know, it can be quite confusing. Um, Everything's moved on, the industry's moved on, but health and safety and not the health and safety construction seems to be stuck in the kind of dark ages. You know,
I was
it's
going to make a comment when you said, you know, referring to guys. I mean, we did a gender disparity report last year. And of course, you know, safety overall in various sectors, not just construction, is male dominated. It's a male dominated sector. And construction, from my perspective, seems to be, you know, quite traditionalist, you know, a little bit more of that culture of laddie kind of culture. It's very hard to us, I assume, walk onto a site where it is extremely male dominated to have that culture. And you mentioned addiction of probably going for beers after work and stuff like that, and then going, actually, I feel like this, and you know, I've got these issues to deal with, and I don't even know which to turn to. So we have had a question come in, Craig, from John, who asks, is suicide within the workplace ever likely to become reportable? I'm probably mispronouncing this, under RIDDOR, RIDDOR. So what are your thoughts on that?
thanks for the comment, John. Anybody that follows me knows that that's ultimately something that I'm looking to get a change with. I say this all the time. I could easily stay in health and safety and bury my head in the sand and ignore the fact that this is going on. I think ultimately, if we did have suicide as a riddor, which is obviously that's my end goal with this, it would make it would certainly make employers more. You know, it would make them focus more on the mental health of their employees rather than it being health and safety at work versus health and safety in the house. I think with the what the HSE are doing just now is great. Having a look at I said that very firmly tongue in cheek there. It's good that they're focusing on stress just now, but I think you've got to kind of practice what you preach rather than it being something that's just there's a stress indicator and let's have a look and there's a risk assessment for it. Also, I think it's actually getting into it and saying, you know, we're overworking our employees. And as I say, with it being a very the construction site is very male dominated. It's a very unforgiving place. It's a very unforgiving culture. It's, as you say, it's the boys will be boys. It's the lads type thing. Going back to John's question, I think it's definitely a goal of mine. It's trying to get a lot more people involved to see if we can throw a bit of weight behind this, because again, I do see that as something that you come up with a new idea or you want to put something into context. It seems to be like bury the head in the sand and just ignore that. It will go away. Since I did put my head above the parapet when speaking about things like this, I have had a bit of abuse on LinkedIn, just with other safety so-called professionals, just saying that they know what they're up to, and that I shouldn't be speaking on the matter. Maybe because it gives them more work, if I'm being brutally honest. Plus the fact nobody likes change. I think that's it. It's trying to have that conversation to change the Health and Safety at Work Act. It's celebrating its 50th year this year. It's maybe a wee bit outdated. It's older than me, believe it or not.
But again, I think what you've said there, reluctance to change, and it is time for change. So I think that's a great goal to have. And the fact that there is such a high rate of suicide, especially within construction, it is shocking. I think it should be reported on. And I think when things are reported on, they're acted on. People kind of do what you report, don't they? So we have had another question, a couple of dual question here from you. So how do I personally talk about my mental health difficulties? And also, what could I say to someone who is feeling low?
I think it's important to notice these things. As I said, it's me personally. I think it's not everybody's responsibility, but as a person, I think we like to hide behind the badges of I'm a health and safety guy or I'm a mental health awareness person. I think it's everybody treating everybody the way that they should and noticing that something's maybe changed in their workplace. And it really is. It's just finding that kind of quiet place, being empathetic to somebody, listening to where they're coming from, just show that kindness and understanding, but also you've got to ask them directly about suicide. It shouldn't be a taboo word in this day and age, especially when we've got so many of them in the UK. It's just asking directly, but show concern without obviously criticising somebody's character. I think a good thing that works on the building sites is signposting. It's one of the first things that I do when I go into a new job is back of the toilet doors, put up the posters for Lighthouse Charity, or whether it's Alcoholics Anonymous or Cocaine Anonymous or whatever it may be, putting them up just to let people know that there is help. And I do find that for myself, it's people really educating themselves on mental health or addiction and not look at it as saying, oh, there's Craig's an alcoholic. It's looking and saying, well, that's Craig and he drinks because of the troubles associated with work. I think that's the important thing, is breaking that down rather than it being something that somebody walks about with a label on.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what you've just said there, it's great to have that further resource, isn't it? It's great to, of course, you want to be empathetic. You don't want to say the wrong thing. You don't want to lead someone down the wrong path. But it's great to have that conversation and say, by the way, mate, if you're feeling like this is who to turn to, or why don't you give this number a call, or why don't you go and see, someone on site? It's having that next step to advise when you're not the professional. So I think we've covered this previously, Craig, when me and you had a chat. But what I've seen is a lot of tick box exercises, and I think a lot of people agree, companies are aware of the situation. They might not have the resources, they might not have the time, it might not be at the top of their agenda. So they say, look, we've got a mental health first aider, tick box, done. So aside from that, can you share any success stories or any initiatives that have worked really well with supporting mental health or addiction recovery in your industry? And, what can companies learn from these examples?
I think I mentioned the Lighthouse Charity, they're great in the UK. They do a lot of good work. I think it's just having that open and honest chats with the workforce. I do see it. Most directors, senior managers, they're not really interested in doing their senior leadership tours or even speaking to the guys. If one of the guys crossed the road, they would cross the other side to get away from them. That's the way that I see it. There still is that us and them type mentality that goes on in the UK, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Other people that I do see, you do see it as a tick box, and as I say, that's why I'm focusing a lot of my attention just now at trying to help. I do see a lot of stuff on the go just now, the likes of Causeway Technologies. I've been speaking to them for a wee while. I hope he's not on this call, but one of my heroes was Trevor Stephen when he played for England and England and Rangers. They're doing a lot of great stuff just now, trying to promote wellness in the construction industry. And for me, it's ensuring that these people are their hearts are in the right place, and I can guarantee you that they are. You know, other people that I speak to also. I've got a colleague, Nick, had one of the most intelligent conversations that I've had in maybe the last 20 years with Nick. What his company does is, rather, if somebody tests positive for drugs or alcohol, what they do in England, if you're caught speeding, you get to go through a course, so maybe a half-day course. What they're doing is the exact same. So if you're found to have something in your system, you go through an awareness training session. Do you know, it shouldn't be the fact that somebody fails drug and alcohol testing. According to our policy, this states that you've got to be removed because it's zero tolerance. It's rubbish. It's draconian. We need to start looking at these things and say, do you know what? Everybody's got their own problems. Everybody has their own issues. So let's start being wise about this. I read something earlier from the Office of National Statistics, and that was saying that it's the highest on record, sorry, when it comes to alcohol-related deaths in the UK.
Yeah.
We need to look into this rather than it being something saying, there's Lauren, she's found a drug test. Bye-bye, Lauren. Bye-bye, Craig. It's, let's work with the people and see why, see if there's anything we can help. Do you know, as I say, I'm on site all the time, and when I speak to people, I notice that guys are a wee bit under the weather. I notice these things, and when I speak to them, what do I do? Do I send those guys home? Do you know? And I've got to explain that to their wives, their grandkids, their sons, their daughters. That's a joke. Do you know? I speak to the men and say, listen, is there anything at all that I can help you with? Because it would break my heart to send them home, plus the fact that, as I say, they've got to explain themselves to their families. I think the minute we stop treating men like cattle and treat everybody as an individual, then the better that life will be.
Yeah, definitely. To get away from that approach of everyone's a number, zero tolerance, it should be an awareness before it gets to that. And I think there's been quite a few comments that have come in while we've been discussing that. And the question from Michael leads me very nicely onto my next question for you, Craig. So firstly, John mentioned construction sport are doing a fantastic job of late. He mentioned Stephen Kerslake, is visiting Scotland next week, so that they've had a good shout out. And Michael in the comments has said, you know, the support in his workplace has developed massively, which is great, and external stigma, but he has reduced, but internal stigma is very much still alive, and I can totally understand that. So guilt, shame, perceived reputations damage is a barrier. What are your thoughts on this, Craig?
I think there's been a big change, as I mentioned earlier. I think there's been a lot of change in the UK in the last 10 years, 20 years. It's unrecognisable from what it was in the early 90s or the 90s. I think construction's still there. Construction's still as bad as it was 20 years ago. There still is that. The equality maybe isn't there because there still is the sexism, the racism, the bigotry, that still exists. As I said, it seems to be left behind in the dark ages. And what I'm trying to do, and a lot of people like Steve, that salute Steve because he's a great guy and his heart's in the right place. It's trying to get these people to help me to move everything forward and try and make that change. Do you know, when I see it, I've been up and down the length and breadth of the UK, so it's not just a Scotland thing. It's still as bad as it has been. And I think it's a hard challenge. And listen, if anybody on here, if your work has achieved great things, then listen, I take my hat off to you. It's speaking up for maybe the other 90%, and I know that's been quite kind to say 90% of companies, because I do have that wide reach throughout the UK, and I do see everything that goes on.
Yeah, definitely. So how would you encourage, whether you're a HR professional, safety professional, whether you're a worker on site that isn't, aligned with well-being, how would you encourage a better culture of being open, not having that reluctance of, reputations damage? How do we get past this, Craig?
I think when it comes to somebody opening up, I wouldn't follow the whistleblowing technique. I've seen that from many a person, and unfortunately, those persons are asked to leave the company. I would say speak to somebody you trust, speak to somebody that will talk on your behalf, whether that's a safety representative. I hope there are people on this call that have wellbeing managers that are interested in being the wellbeing manager rather than pulling out a nice trophy every year and saying we're the wellbeing champions of the UK. It's trying to find somebody that you trust, and it's getting the managers to realise. Unfortunately, when I speak to a lot of the managers, it's only money that talks. Do you know, that's the sad thing. It just seems to revolve around about money. What's in it for me? Do you know? And I always say, if the stats are there. If you put in £1 to employees' wellbeing, you get £5 back. Reduced presenteeism, absenteeism, a revolving door that revolves round about the work area. Do you know? So sometimes, unfortunately, you do need to talk sometimes in monetary terms. Gets through to them.
Yeah, definitely. And that, I suppose, brings me very nicely on to my next question. So we've spoken about this in a general term, from an employer perspective. But what about, if someone is a wellbeing manager or they're a safety manager who have got a lot of wellbeing, concerns on site? How are they best to raise this to the leaders who, let's be honest, they're kind of strung within budgets, they've got monetary concern. You're a health and safety manager who wants to raise the wellbeing profile of your construction site. How is best to go about raising this topic with leaders or even boards?
I think that's the $1,000,000 question, Lauren,
Yeah.
if I'm being honest. It seems to be every year it's the same old awareness campaigns, it's the same old chats, it's the posters coming out once a year, it's all that kind of stuff. It's directors actually taking it on board. As I say, sometimes you've just got to speak to people in monetary terms. It's very, very, very hard because the heads are so firmly buried in that sand that they just don't listen. Do you know, if it's a wellbeing manager that's trying to raise the profile, then by all means, once a year is great. Once a day is even better. Do you know, getting people out there and having that conversation that maybe people don't want to have. And even when I'm out with companies and it is mental health awareness week, or it's drop the cup day, or whatever it may be, do you know, whatever they badge it up as, it's actually living it and breathing it every single day. Do you know, and it's funny when somebody mentioned guys like Steve, because Steve's the same as myself. We live and breathe it every single day in this country. And we're not those people that say, oh, it's such and such awareness month, let's put a poster up. Oh, it's mental health day, let's buy the guys a pizza. Do you know, it's got to come from the top. It's got to be director driven. And as I'd said, if you try and get people onto senior leadership tours and director tours and they're not interested because they've got a haircut that day, or they're golfing, then you've lost it. You've lost the room. It's really trying to get this culture of trust. And until you show that culture of trust, then unfortunately, we'll still be having this same conversation in 5 years. 10 years. It'll just keep getting worse.
Yeah, definitely. And something's really got to change. I mean, Jeff in the comments, he mentions a colleague of his was sacked in the 1980s for attempting suicide, which is absolutely awful. He said, I know we need to make more progress in this area, but at least now helping at-risk employees is considered as an employer duty. So all those things have moved on, just not at the speed that's necessary. And John's mentioned here a cost-benefit analysis of good mental health within an organisation would be good. If we invest in our people's mental health, if we have the resources, if we, we'll cut down on sickness, on absence, long-term sick, this is what we can do to support it. And it is an investment, isn't it? And it's getting that conversation at a very senior level, which is tough. As you said, $1 million question, if only it was that easy.
Yeah, but it's the way that you look at it as well, Lauren. They were saying it's as I say, it's due to rise to 17 trillion by 2030. Since the last general election, there's been more than 20,000 suicides, and the budget, there's no room for improvement in the budget. Where does leadership start in the UK or Scotland with a devolved parliament? It starts at the top. And if these guys don't care, it's very, very hard to influence change. And I've always said that I think that there's nothing that shakes a cage worse than a short Scotsman, and I will fight on behalf of everybody to make sure that their rights are acknowledged. We've got a perfect example of this Sunday. This Sunday's International Worker Memorial Day. Did anybody's companies put anything out about that, about the fallen in our work areas? Nobody mentions it. Yeah, no. If you look on LinkedIn on Monday morning, it'll be the same old faces standing at a graveside saying, "Oh, we could have done better, we could have done better." I'm saying to all directors, health and safety guys, HR, we need to do better. I know if there's anybody that's listening to me here, get it done. Don't just keep talking about it. Don't keep burying your head in the sand. Actually get off your bum and do something. Could have swore there, but didn't.
Thank you, live show. It's like Big Brother, isn't it? Please do not swear. But yeah, you're allowed to, definitely. I think from what I've definitely taken from you today, Craig, it's all around communication and consistency. Not a case of let's see when the next trendy campaign's coming out, put a shiny LinkedIn poster up and, look like we're ticking the boxes, but actually investing in your people, having that at all levels as well. It shouldn't just be one person's responsibility, like that one person on site. It should be a collective effort to create a better result. I mean, my very last question before we run out of time, I feel like the second I start talking, it just flies away with us. But I suppose my last question is around kind of well-being benefits. So when we talk about remuneration, overall, of course, salary is a massive one, but what do you think about companies investing in private healthcare, which includes mental health? Would that make a huge difference, do you think, with the strain on the NHS and everything? What are your thoughts?
Talk about the strain with the NHS. You've got employee assistance programs, and there was something I was reading yesterday, and they're saying only 8% of people use employee assistance programs, which sounds good when you look at it and you say 92% of people don't use an employee assistance program. I think part of what I'm doing just now is I do chats throughout the UK and I speak openly about my own struggles and try and give, like what we've spoken about, is the signs to look out for. And it's, I think, a hard thing for this is I was speaking to a very, very well-known company, and I won't name them, but they had said that they had 100 people on site. They were wanting me to come tell a story, and they said that it's okay, 50 of them are contractors, Craig, they can just jump in their van and sit and have an early lunch. And I said, well, I'm not interested in doing it. If we leave the contractors at the door, it's all for one and one for all. This can't be something that the contractors do one for half an hour whilst they comes in and talks. So it's trying to really get it in there. And I was speaking about Trevor earlier, and I think one of the main goals is obviously suicide being radar reportable, but it's getting mental health awareness and training and just everything to whoever's on site. If we wrote that into contracts at the kind of the start of a contract at procurement level, if we wrote that in, everybody's entitled to mental health support. But it's good having that. Not so good if people are hiding it, because a lot of people say, well, this is my initiative, it's my ball, and you're not playing with it, and run away and hide it.
Yeah, Definitely, I think a real good point there. We have run out of time. It's such a shame, and I want to firstly thank you so much, Craig, for coming on. Dave here has said insightful session, and I really think it has been. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. I think this is a topic which does have stigma attached, of course, but it's great to have individuals like yourself campaigning, being consistent, getting the message out there, living and breathing it, as you said. And I'll read this final comment. I think a little bit of it's been cut off from John, who mentions several cost-benefit analysis and reviews have been conducted regarding the impact of good mental health within organisations. For instance, he mentions a Thriving at Work report. So this has been conducted by Stevenson and Farmer. This significant cost of the poor mental health to the UK businesses. So he's estimated it being between 33 and 42, that it enhances productivity, reduces costs by investing. So I think that's something that's really interesting, and the link to the report is in there. And everyone in the comments is thanking you, Craig, very much so, and keep fighting the fight. And that's the kind of message that I'd like to relay today. I think this is something that isn't just a half an hour topic, definitely not, but anything that we can do to continually raise awareness of such an important topic is great. It's great to have you on this platform, and I can only thank you enough. So thanks to everyone for getting involved. I know that I've tried to get to the comments as much as I can today. Usually I'm like in the comments and doing fancy banners, and Laura's leading the convo, but she's left me here as she swans off to Europe, but she'll be back next month. If you do want to continue the conversation, if I'm all right saying this, Craig, you can reach out to Craig. Reach out to Craig via LinkedIn, drop him a DM, get that conversation started. If you're someone that wants to take this to the board, I think there's a big push there, isn't there, to get this topic, on the board agenda. Keep doing what you can, get in touch with Craig, and I'm sure as you mentioned, it's a collective effort, it's everyone's responsibility. And I think, hearing those stats today is absolutely shocking. So something's definitely got to change, and thank you for driving that change, Craig. But I will let you go. A wonderful half an hour with yourself. Thank you very much. And please do get in touch with Craig to find out more. But thank you all for joining us, and I'll see you next month.
Thanks very much. Speak to you all later. Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.